Back in Budapest, walking to my hostel, I wanted to get this building, particularly that upper part, that frieze, if you will, of statues. This entire block seems to be a church, as you can see by that steeple with a cross on it, but also fortress-like, no? Today is Sunday. Yesterday was Saturday, for any reference I made yesterday to it being Sunday. This is what I call park art, for lack of a better term. Don't know for sure what it symbolizes, but particularly relative to the quote you just read, unless that is a fabric or whatever being thrown to the man on the ground to provide him with rescue for something. But it reminds me of something from Crouching Tiger movie. Has that illusion, man bouncing off of a building. Notice his finger outstretched and how polished it is. One touches that for good luck. Situated down at the end of this little narrow park insert, for lack of a better term. Be very much like Rome, this feeling here, if only it had a little table and an umbrella that said Cinzano on it. I'm now inside the Akinkum Museum. It's on a Sunday, so it'll be very busy. This is the interior museum portion here. And the archaeological park is over in this area. Here's a map giving us an idea of where we can go. My little finger is where we're at. And we can walk straight ahead and then hang a left. That takes us into that area there. Little kids' playground area in the motif, which is cute. What the complex are many people dressed in Roman garb to add some more sizzle to this steak. I doubt even Caesar had a cell phone. There's the entrance gate. I'm just going to pan around so we've got a clue of what we're dealing with. This in front of us, which we'll come back to, is the Great Dwelling House. You can see considerable restoration. I'll pan across this explanatory picture, if you will, of the site in front of me. So if someone wants to from this video, they can identify particular buildings. There's the Great Dwelling House on the right, so we're panning off from that. There's that archway that you saw on the right. There, somewhere through there, we should be looking at the butcher's house, the masalem, the artisans' houses, the aqueduct somewhere back there, and then the bolster shops, whatever those are, over against the far side of this complex, and then strip buildings, the ones right along here, I guess. The right of the Great House, we'll start just by walking down this old Roman road. Notice the large flagstones here, and if this seems to be similar, the Romans, of course, over the course of 1,000 years, had done a splendid job of developing a format for building everything. And this is apparently a day of reenactment, and something that allows kids to at least experience some of the tools and history of the Romans, and maybe their enemies. Down this path just to start, which leads us behind the great house. Maybe some facsimiles of weapons, shields. Size of those spearheads, if they in fact were true. I've seen some, not quite as long as that, in the museums of course, but very quite capable of puncturing almost any kind of leather armament, not to mention flesh, or the dress stone for whatever the purpose might have been of that stone. It was those notches there were designed to secure other stones in place, which what is so difficult to do and what is so tantalizing and frustrating in sites like this is to somehow try to get your brain to see what life might have been like within these confines. And there's no way I can do it, I just don't have that ability. Okay, I'm standing right where the eye is for information at 4. Behind me is the Great House private bath, and to my right, which we'll look at in a moment with a bunch of columns, number 5, is the great dwelling peristylium. We're now, I believe, inside the center of the home. It was built like many Spanish and European places, a home surrounding an inner court. This would have been the inner court, the peristylium, and it would have been a water feature here. Notice the water system in the ground. Beyond it, in glass also, is the great dwelling reception hall building with exhibition, so we'll walk over there and take a look. Remember, this area we're walking into the right, or the outside of the peristylium, would have been covered. This would go downstairs from the level of the peristylium to get into the reception hall area. And around just to give us a sense of the dimension here. Notice the cement ceiling, so obviously this has been rebuilt, but it gives you an idea of the size. This would have been a sizable building, or room, in this home, and probably the home of a very important person, if not the important person. Just look at some of the mosaics, not restored, and pretty simple here, mainly just design patterns. Same thing there. So this might have been, well, this is an important room, so I don't know. These might be from some other place. I don't know if this is a restoration, I guess it is, of a Roman wall in such a place. Whether it was a restoration of the original wall here, I don't know. This carving, I don't know its use, but the larger figure, the important person, the lesser figure, either a statue of someone, which is suggested by the pedestal they're standing on, or a person of lesser import. Again, as I pan down to this panel, I don't know whether it's original, a complete copy, a partially restored chunk of. There are portions there that, like, let's focus in closely, like right here, where the paint, green paint below, is covered by a layer of something. So maybe if you didn't like a prior painting, you plastered over it and put a new. And it's possible that is a graphic that I simply can't identify in the center of that design. Look at our SWAT team, Kevlar coated soldiers and police today, and think, what an amazing technological zenith that represents, but in its day, maybe this did the same. I think these statues are the work of a local important artist, perhaps. This is a reconstructed version of a lance thrower, pretty much analogous to a crossbow. Here a modest catapult, reconstructed, but perhaps with, no, I don't think so. The hardware is even original. Notice the rope and maybe even hide was used as the wound spring device, if you will. And then there's a gear to lock it in place once you've ratcheted the arm down. You wonder how they designed that sling so that one or the other of those 3 ropes didn't affect the flight of the projectile. A normal slingshot, of course, has just 2 ropes, and so it just slides out when the rope separates. This may or may not represent a drawing of how it might look. It doesn't have the peristyle in it, stellium in it, so I don't think it is, but probably a 17th or 18th century fire water pump. Notice the nozzle, so you shot right straight from here. In those days, buildings probably weren't that high, and that pump wouldn't shoot very high, but at least it was a pump that shot high, so you didn't have to carry pails up a ladder on the side of a burning building. I'm sure on the internet somewhere there is some explanation of how this pump works. Well, just what it looks like, a colorful drain. And here, a small theater. Certainly the seats are not original, but the location may be, and the columns may also be from it. Hopefully these stubs are. And notice that there are rooms here. If it's like some of the ones I've seen, there was a place for actors to dress and blah 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 before they entered onto the stage. Makes sense. Rather sizable room. But notice these little channels are not little but big. These are probably either waterways or sewerways. Here, more rooms, some divided. For the private bath, we're going slightly deeper into the overall system. The line represents the difference, I'm thinking, between what was found here and restored, or an earlier restoration and a more current restoration. I think this purple line may represent the difference between an earlier restoration and a more recent restoration. Just behind the double bath indicated, I'm just guessing by that rounded room over there, and then this rounded room right here. Significant waterway suggests something like that, and you can see it traipsing through. This area would have been filled with pillars of brick and then a floor on top of that to hide the waterways and steamways. My incredible skills of archaeology, I have determined that this is in fact a double bath. Of course, I am aided somewhat by all the literature I have in my hand and this interpretive sign. An entryway, and we wonder what that stone dressing is for. Did it have a very pretty rock inside of it? Perhaps once formed the frame of the doorway? It's the same. Remember, there was a man and a woman section usually. This is probably one or the other. Here we've got 3 rooms. And what this is for, if it's old or a modern construct, oftentimes was a cold plunge. There was a place to sit and relax. Usually baths like this also had a place for having drinks and maybe even various kinds of athletics. Corresponding cold plunge for the other sex. Walking up into a rather large bath. Notice how we've walked up steps, but now it seems to end there, unless, I don't know what the unless would be. Because down there should be the pool. Did you swim in this? Or just sit at the bottom on those stones? This takes us into another area, but a pretty substantial taking into her. And you can see how the floor was created. Whether those stones were always there. They're pretty massive for that purpose. Seems a little bit curious. We're to the left of the baths in our direction of flow. Notice again those side channel there for the flow of water, the same as we have water pipes and drainage pipes running through houses, or under houses I should say. Again, here would have been I suspect a main street. This whole complex that we're looking at that's excavated represents about 25% of what this little town was. But these may represent the point where columns were, and the area we're walking under now might well have been covered, which is kind of a pretty thing to imagine if that's the case for this little residential area, if that's what it is. Little slits here, I don't know, unless they're excavated water trenches, but... Craftsman houses through here. They only had one entrance coming in for the people. It had a courtyard. Which one was which, I don't know, unless it's this part in the center. There was one additional door they speak of, and that was larger than the doors in the rest of the town. Perhaps, and it was on the street, of course, as opposed to an alley, I guess, and maybe that offered access for goods being brought into the craftsmen. There was only one room that was heated, this one here, I'm sure, and it's interesting to imagine if those blocks there are original ones. I don't think so, but this is original. Gives us an idea of how the actual flooring was throughout this entire complex. I'm standing at the back of all of that artisans' houses, and I don't know what all this was, whether it was a part of it or not. So this is the courtyard that was spoken of, and that all of this area was tradesmen houses. I don't know. Don't think so. This is the courtyard with the herbal garden, which I assume is over there. It also looks like a well. And then to the right of this would be the Collegium Center, maybe. Sounds like a school. And it having its own big interior area, but we'll check out an interpretive sign over there. Whether there was an herbal garden here originally, I don't know that anyone knows. Interesting to imagine the depth of that. Into an even broader road, whether the other 3/4 went beyond here or not, I don't know. And if those stones are originally positioned, it was a raised street, which would make some sense in that Romans were smart enough to put drainage on the side. Oh, beyond that little tent is the artisans' houses, but here is the Artisan Society's collegium, or headquarters, throughout this area. It's considered the center of corporate life, whatever corporate meant then. Large reception chamber, supported by these 3 pillars. And here is a fragment of an altar dedicated to Epona, protector of pack animals. Adjacent compound of a similar nature, there is a lower, or a compartment below grade in the central reception room of that compound, then which they found a small terracotta lighthouse, which they think may have been a part of the lighting system. So imagine the building with little lighthouse replicas having candles or oil or whatever they burned in there. And was this one of those types of pillars? But notice this is offset from there. There's one pillar here and one pillar here. Doesn't speak about those. Through here are dwellings, and we'll walk up through this walkway to take a look over the right and see them. This is a little bit of a portrayal of what this might have looked like. What's interesting about this system is that there's a long, what looks like a walkway. Now it may well have had the sewer line running underneath it. Toilets were built on top of the sewer line for obvious reasons. And there you can see what the grade level was. So something was underneath these floors. Now whether it was just air or water, this thing is, notice that the floor is probably 2.5 feet above the grade we're on now. And I don't know if this grade represents the lowest depth of the normally exposed walls. Like the remains of Roman sewer pipes installed in concrete, assuming these are Roman, it was not atypical. They were aware of this interlocking system that we still use on ABS pipe for sewers. Really substantial streets if you think about it. Particularly considering that these may have been either maybe dwellings, but maybe covered walk areas. I don't know for sure. Well, it looks like they were dwellings of some sort. But still, it would be a sizable street. Now, it might have been constricted by shops and so forth, like you see in some places in the world, on both sides. Standing right on the left side of that brown line that starts on the right side towards the bottom and kind of angles up a little bit and then continues on to the left side. At the base of the long, same colored line that goes vertically right up to the top. So we'll walk up that way. Actually, I'm at the very left side of the number 9, and I'll walk over to number on the right side of number 2, I think, or 12, excuse me. And then we'll notice it looks like a long hallway between these adjoining rooms. We'll walk up here, taking us into this area where the trees are. We're looking at where the trees are. Notice that column to the right of that right-hand tree. This was the meat market area. Over here, all the way over to this other column. Looking at the diagram where you can see the round 9, surrounded 9, and the columns around it, that's what we're looking at. Entrance was over there from the left. Thought to be either a shrine or a place where weights and measures were kept and controlled. This side, in the street stones, was a gutter designed to flush the water and the blood and entrails of animals out into the sewer system. These were the identical sized shops. These grooves were for the placing of boards to lock up the shops at night. Probably just like many of the markets I've been in Eastern Europe, where you'll find butcher shop after butcher shop after butcher shop, same size, down the same street in the market, all selling pretty much the same. It was the drainage for that market. And this may have been a well inside this person's home or business. Visible rocks for whatever this was. Notice that we're standing about 3.5 feet to 4 feet below grade. I mean, grade being the floor in these buildings. And this would have been how water moves underneath there. Were these ovens or something? I'm standing in the midst of the great public bath. Which would make sense considering what a sizable area this is. Now here's our rounded area here. And that may be the second one over there. We'll just walk over into it. Is. Imagine the amount of fuel it took, not to mention water, to keep these baths hot, if you will. Weathered column posts or pedestals. They're a large, what looks like a large pool with a drainage system going off to the side there, connected, if you will, to this bigger one coming through here. Those 4 or 5 archways we saw probably directed water out into various parts of the bath. This large complex was the forum with a large shrine to. Imagine this area surrounded by those big pillars, and then imagine the magnitude of what was above it with a pediment and so forth, looking very Roman. How little we as laymen can gain from this. This was the Roman courthouse. Notice all the rooms back there. And these larger rooms might have been the courtrooms, who knows, I don't. I mean, it would have looked as august and powerful and imposing as do the reproductions that the societies after it, including ours, have created. Just to recap where we've been, number 13 in the lower left was where the great baths, public baths were, I think. And then 15 and 14. Okay, so 15 and 14 were where the great public baths were. Then we crossed over, and there, number 16 is the Forum, and number 17 the courthouse, and over there 18 and 19 home. Don't know why that's so significant and why he was powerful enough to have his own home, or wealthy enough. And also another set of public baths. We won't go over there. And here a lapidarium of tombs, if you will. And notice of varying sizes. Here you can see just the remains of either some carving. Yes, there is some relief carving on this. And maybe even a hint of paint right in there. Now this is all made out of sandstone, so relatively easy to make compared to some of the ones we've seen which were made out of potpourri, if that's the right word for that kind of stone, and other very, very hard stones. But alas, less than twice the length of time of the Roman Empire itself. These people who sought eternity in these stones, not only are they long gone and forgotten, their stones are nearly long gone and forgotten. It's how the family or the person themselves must have pleased themselves with how beautiful that stone looked when it was carved and placed on site. Could never have imagined this. It's humility for those who expected more. Fortunately, I expect nothing more because it siphons the water off. I wonder if the stonemason himself chuckled, knowing himself that even stone, particularly this sandstone, wears away. But his family ate. Here a lapidarium will cruise through fairly quickly and then get to the museum, because that complete cloud cover is covering the direction I must go back to Budapest. Probably the covers of those sarcophaguses are tombs, although they might have been tombstones themselves. I'll just grab the most interesting, complete ones. Maybe someone can decipher what the date is on this one. Yes, these are the barbarian hordes whose gold Rome was really after. Maybe portraying a family. Yes, a man on the right, woman on the left. That the Romans were attempting to copy and improve upon the Greeks' sculpturing skills. They had skills of perspective in art that were, I think, lost until the Renaissance, and Brunelleschi and others resurrected them. And a couple. But notice the man is naked, the woman not. What does she hold in her right hand? What are they holding in their left hand as staves? And the significance of the bird. And the usual bunch of camp followers. Maybe an early Roman family home. The Bronze Age Roman home. Probably a reproduction of an in-site grave. Little sculptures, I doubt they're terribly old. They might be something interesting, but this one, don't know what that person or little boy may be holding in his hand. But here, a little girl holding either her doll, or I think that's it. And I don't know what this building was. Maybe it was a school. It's dilapidated now. Two more. The one on the right looking the same, I think, as the one on the left. And the one on the left holding a wreath in her arms. Now at the upstream end of Margaret Island. There's a very large island in the middle of the Danube, pretty much like a park. It's from down there that where the main center of Budapest is, that boats leave to go on up to Vienna, believe it or not, or up to Visegrad and two or three other what are supposed to be quaint little towns that I'll visit later this week. Wander down through the island until I get to the next bridge, which is the bridge that has the big angle in it, and then I'll go to the left onto the Pest side, and then meander my way back to the hostel unless I feel like it, and then I'll go to the Buda side and go up into the cathedral and to Fisherman's Bastion. It's a very good and obligatory kids playground. It's made out of some kind of spongy material, which is really good. It saves your knees. Here, as I can observe on this Sunday, there is a massive bike path system here in Budapest, including a bike path around this island. Or at least to the legends of Central Park, New York City, this is not the kind of place you want to be at night. Adult playground, exercise equipment. And you see that in many parts of the world now. Very lovely park-like area. I'll follow this down a ways, and then I'm going to cut to the right and get over onto the side of the island so we can pick up the ambience of the Danube. Here's a pretty little band tower, for lack of a better term. And then I can pan across to still another church across on the Buda side of Budapest. Imagine that what's pretty and intimate during the daytime could be dangerous at night. Statue with its own little turtle on the base, and a pretty little water feature, and more turtles. Some pretty little views as I walk along. We'll explore them a little bit. A building over there for some reason. As I think about it, a Danube cruise might be an extremely boring experience unless you love just sitting, drinking and eating and watching endless miles of modern riverside go by. Except in those areas where there's not much, and then it'll be pretty countryside, but lots of it. Sitting here at this little cafe with some soda water and some potato chips with paprika. Something the Balkans love. Okay, looking at the map, right in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see it says to the left of Park Street, it says Ankinacum, which is the Roman site, and I walked down one of the main roads there, all the way down to where it says, looks like Árpád. Walked across that bridge, and about halfway you can see it intersects the tip of Margaret. So I'm somewhere along the left side of it as we're looking at this map, and I'll walk down, pick up that angled bridge, and either go left to Buda or right to Pest. Starting to sprinkle, even though the sun's out in spots. Either all hell will break loose or we'll luck out. Or combination. Magnificent huge trees on this island still remain. I don't know if these are the linden trees or not that you occasionally hear about. They remind me of larch, the way their bark peels. There's some kind of a building. Duh. Or waste. Not the waste, but the middle part. Wide middle part of the island. But it has a grand, large park feeling to it. You saw what looks like a flower display, so I'm going to angle over there. Pretty little section of roses, and there's another down there. Another little bit of color. It's always pretty. A huge garden, lawn, open area. Huge combination lawn and garden area surrounded by what seems like a deep forest. Cool, we've stumbled onto a little aviary. Some interesting ducky looking things. Those look like harlequin ducks, but not quite. Maybe injured birds brought here. You have dinner. Fuzzy little things, aren't they? In the form of chicken, I assume. Well, that was a little flicker of lightning and then one hell of a blast right over my head. Okay, so down there is the bridge we're walking towards. Off to the left is the Parliament House. And way up in the center there is on top of the Palace Hill, or Castle Hill, whichever they call it. Interesting to see this evidence, these pylons, or whatever you call them, of past use of the island, including these hooks to moor ships to the quay here. Many, many more ships on the other side, of course, now. In fact, all of them, except for something kind of grungy down here on the right. But probably in the summertime, all these things get a chance to go into heavy-duty use. Here comes a clap of thunder. Tennis courts, clay courts, it looks like. Now down to southern. Equally park-like with flowers, lots of runners out today. It's arcade-like. Water features over there. We'll go take a look. Sculpture at this turnaround right, I think almost at the southern tip. I'm going to show a series of things like this that are unique. Well, kind of unique. This black is not stone, it's rubberized. So the blind person is walking along and they're tapping like that person's cane is doing. When they hit that rubberized stuff, no noise. They know there's an obstacle there, something they have to be careful of.
Please?
Yeah.
I picked.
Let me get this first.
Oh, yeah.
There are two of three fellows I met on the train coming down from Bratislava. One is from China, one is from Korea, and they sell a power converter for computers and stuff like that. This is 1956. Do with anything until you walk along the side and then come back and look down below. Now I'll have to go back and find out what the date implies, but this picture sure as hell gives a clue. The actual remnants of that uprising or the battle or whatever it was. Be interesting to find out. An older building with some interesting but subtle detail, particularly in its grimy condition. It's subtle. But we'll go up and take a look at those figures. And wonder who they are or who they might represent. Could this have been an important family's home? Or an embassy? Or a government building? And on this building, which seems nondescript but may have been part of some identifiable style, with a couple of four little characters right there I want to see. How curious they are, both their size and their location. A musical instrument. Another musical instrument, unless that's a painter's easel. Otherwise ordinary building, but probably again of an identifiable style if you knew architecture, but certainly an interesting front here, or corner, with these two balconies and their statues. Were these statues added afterward? They're painted pink and gold. I don't want to take anything away from these buildings because of my ignorance. They are not that far away, a block or two away from the National Legislature. And they are large government type buildings, but maybe early 20th century? Like this kind of an affectation on a building, the little balcony that sits out. So you can imagine wanting to see what's going on in the street and looking for someone who's coming to visit and walking out and being able to look sideways down the street. Budapest seems loaded with parks, which is a great thing. And they're pretty and they're maintained and yet old, where it's appropriate like this. So let's wander down and see. I may have been here before, I just don't recognize it from this vantage point. The side of this building, in particular the frieze up on top, which we're going to go up to right now, reminds me in finished condition of the near destroyed building with similar work on the outside, more detailed, more interesting than this really. This is, I think, quite repetitive, in, I think it was Mostar, Bosnia. I have been here before, and I'm not sure if the water feature was going at the time. People have left mementos here at this monument. Let's see if we can find out what for. So what we're looking at here, I'll explain as quickly as I can. There are two monuments here. The one you see being built, this is being built by the Hungarian government. Its premise is that the Nazis were absolutely, totally responsible for all of the genocide that occurred and the Holocaust with regard to Hungarian Jews. In fact, the Hungarians were allies with Nazi Germany and were allies in the rounding up and in the killing of Jews in Hungary. They have absolute responsibility, according to this Jewish person I talked to, who's the key man. You can see him there in this jacket waving this pamphlet there. And he argues that the Hungarian government was absolutely responsible. But this monument, and the one in the background, is for the purpose of expressing the fact that the Nazis were totally responsible, absolving Hungary of all responsibility. The memorabilia that you see on the ground there is what Jewish people and supporters of the truth, as he would argue it, have left, alleging the fact that Hungary was implicitly, completely, totally involved with the German Nazis in the Holocaust and should be held responsible. It's the first time I was in the square. It's turned into a zoo, a kids zoo, although some are not completely happy with the experience. By various companies. This is apparently a tower built by, or of, and of, Legos. I think such a fabrication standing in front of a Catholic church is more than appropriate. It looks like a truck made of Legos. When I was at this park about 9 or 10 days ago with a walking tour and then by myself the next day, there were some large pieces of heavy equipment here getting ready to build something. This is what they built. It's all part of, I think, the celebration within several blocks. Don't know if there was water in it before, but there is now. It's amazing that somebody would build something like this that's mobile. It's a heck of a big thing, but mobile. But they must move it around the major cities in Europe. They must make a lot of money with it. It's 2,400 ROM, or €8 for like something out of Harry Potter, doesn't it? Very mosque-like looking.